Today, we're going to dive into two really fascinating and powerful genres of ancient writing that you probably never covered in Sunday school. We're talking about testamentarian and martyrdom literature. I know it sounds a little strange, but honestly, that's one of the best ways to think about these ancient texts. People took the stories and characters they knew and loved and basically decided to write the prequels, the sequels, and all the deleted scenes. Okay, so let's get into this. These weren't just casual fans, you know? The authors were people who knew their scriptures inside and out. But they saw gaps, they had questions, and they used their incredible creative and theological skills to expand on the original stories, really making them speak to their own turbulent times. Now, the official name for this whole body of work is pseudepigrapha. And writing in the name of some famous figure, well, it wasn't seen as forgery back then. It was more like a way of honoring that person's legacy and giving your words some serious authority. But even more importantly, it was a way for a community to process their reality during a really, really difficult period of history. So let's start with our first genre, testamentary literature. I want you to imagine the most dramatic scene in a blockbuster movie. You know the one. The hero is on their deathbed. They're revealing long-held secrets and giving one last epic speech. Well, that is the absolute essence of these stories. And where they get this idea? Well, the original template comes straight from the Bible itself. In Genesis 49, the patriarch Jacob gathers his 12 sons around him and gives each one a prophecy about their future. The authors of the pseudepigrapha basically thought, hey, what if each of those sons did the exact same thing? And they followed a pretty consistent formula, almost like a script. It always starts with the deathbed scene. Then you get a confession, a moment of just brutal honesty about their past mistakes. This leads into some ethical advice for the next generation, and it usually ends with a prophecy, a little glimpse into what's coming. Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting. These authors used this formula to solve what they saw as major plot holes in the original scriptures. Let's take the case of Levi, one of Jacob's sons. So the authors had a huge problem. In the book of Genesis, Levi is shown as a seriously violent guy who, along with his brother, slaughters an entire town. But his descendants become the holy priests of Israel. For a community whose entire religious life depended on that priesthood, this was a big deal. I mean, how could such a violent man be their holy founder? The Testament of Levi comes up with this brilliant solution. They basically do a recon. The story reveals that Levi's violent act wasn't a sin at all. No, instead, it was a preordained divine judgment against the wicked people, a mission that was literally written on the heavenly tablets. His whole character gets a complete whitewash, which gives the priesthood some much-needed validation. But they don't just stop at excusing his past. To really seal the deal, the text describes Levi being whisked away into the heavens for this spectacular ordination ceremony. He has to be made a priest up in the heavenly realm before he can serve in its shadow down on earth. And this just brilliantly shows you the grandeur of that moment. Angels themselves dress him in 7 symbolic garments, everything from the robe of the priesthood to the ephod of prophecy. Each one represents a divine quality. So this isn't just a guy getting a job. This is a full-on heavenly investiture, cementing his role and the legitimacy of his descendants for all time. Now, while the Testament of Levi solved a tricky theological problem, our second genre, martyrdom literature, came from something way more immediate: intense pain, suffering, and persecution. For a community that was facing unimaginable violence, these stories were an absolute lifeline. They gave people a kind of spiritual blueprint for how a faithful person could face a torturous death with courage. It was a way of taking a meaningless, terrifying act and reframing it as a heroic moment with cosmic purpose. And just like the Testaments, these stories followed a pattern. You have a true prophet who is opposed by wicked rivals. Then a demonic force, who's often called Beliar, influences an evil ruler. That ruler condemns the prophet to a brutal death. But through it all, the prophet stays faithful right to the very end. The most famous example of this whole genre has to be the martyrdom of Isaiah. I mean, the Bible tells us a ton about the prophet Isaiah's life and his prophecies, but it's completely silent on how he died. Well, this story fills in that blank, in the most gruesome way you can imagine. The story is set right during the transition from the good king Hezekiah to his truly wicked son, Manasseh. Manasseh, who's been influenced by the demon Beliar, turns on Isaiah. The prophet flees, but he's betrayed, captured, and dragged before the evil king.
Manasseh's method of execution is just horrifying. He orders Isaiah to be sawn in two with a wood saw. The text repeats this detail, really emphasizing the sheer brutality of the act and the prophet's incredible, faithful endurance in the face of it.
And get this extra-biblical story became so influential and so widely known that it's directly referenced in the New Testament. When the author of Hebrews is listing all the trials of the faithful prophets, they include that some were sawn in two. That's a clear nod to this exact tradition about Isaiah. So after all that, why should we care about these ancient, non-biblical stories today? I mean, they seem wild, maybe even a little strange, but they are incredibly important. These texts give us this priceless window into a community grappling with the biggest questions of life: evil, justice, faithfulness in the face of suffering. They show a deep, creative, and dynamic relationship with their scripture. And critically, they formed the theological backdrop for the writers of the New Testament. Ultimately, they were doing what every generation tries to do: make ancient wisdom speak to their present reality. And that really leaves us with a final thought. 2,000 years ago, people told stories about heavenly garments and prophets being sawn in two to find validation and hope, to make sense of their world. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What stories are we telling today?